speaker today. I just had the pleasure of meeting just a few minutes ago, and his name is Ron. He's from Fargo, North Dakota.
Hello, everybody. My name is Ron, and I'm an addict. And for those of you who didn't hear it, my home group is the illustrious and world-famous Friday night NA meeting in Fargo, North Dakota. And I don't know why I get scared shitless every time that I'm going to speak to NA people, because I know that that there's love and non-judgmental warmth and all that stuff, right? I think I'm probably more afraid of making an ass of myself than I'm afraid of you. But at any rate, I was told that I could speak for what I think they said 2 hours and 15 minutes on about 45 on a subject of my choosing. So I'm going to talk about me. The only thing I really know for sure about recovery in Narcotics Anonymous is my own story, and some of that's pretty cloudy. But I'm gonna do my best to tell you what it was like for me developing the disease of addiction, and what it's like now in the recovery process. And in my own personal program and my own personal belief, the most important part of all of that is the 12 steps. So I'm going to try to spend most of my time talking about the steps and the way in which I use those steps and have used those steps in recovery. So those of you who are here to hear a good blow-by-blow drug-a-log, I'm sorry. I probably won't be entertaining for you. I'm going to start out, however, because I do believe it's real important that we all relate to each other and that we all kind of know we're in the right place and in the same place for the same reasons. I'm going to talk somewhat about what it was like in my addiction. And I never know where the hell to begin. I guess a lot of times we talk about the family we grew up in and the childhood and all that. I look back on all that, and the truth of the matter is I grew up in a very addictive family. Today there are 5 of us in the recovery process in my family, my immediate family. I should say 5 of us in the recovery from addiction process. There are others in the recovery process in some of those other fellowships, and there's a couple. Well, there's one that's still doing some research, and one is too young to be thinking about all that bullshit yet. So, anyway, it's when I look back on that, I should be able to have a whole bunch of war stories about all kinds of abuse and strange goings on and all that, but I really don't. I grew up in a family that my dad was a successful businessman in a reasonably normal home, so it appeared to us, in a reasonably normal Midwestern community. He drove a gas truck, and I don't know, it was kind of tense around our house at supper time on a regular basis because Dad was usually late and he had to stop for his drug of choice on his way home, and that sort of stuff. And things got a little bit twisted by the time everybody was hitting bottom. But other than that, I would like to say I had a reasonably normal childhood. I grew up building tree forts, and those places were dens of iniquity. I'm sure most of you have had camps or forts of some kind when you were growing up, and float down the river on inner tubes and doing things, had friends, and was part of the human race, I guess. And somewhere along the line, I think I was in about 7th grade after having been, I was diagnosed as I was being emotionally disturbed at a very young age. I'm not sure exactly what that meant. I went to a psychiatrist or psychologist or whatever and had to put little pegs and, make patterns and all this stuff and ask a bunch of questions. And afterwards he sat me down and he told me that I had an inferiority complex. I was totally unaware that of what an inferiority complex was and all this stuff, and I didn't much care, but I was told that, and I thought, if anything, my friends thought I was conceited and arrogant. I don't know where this inferiority complex stuff comes from. But at any rate, I was pretty young when the first drug that I ever experienced was alcohol, and I developed a love affair with that drug from the very first time. I guess I went out deliberately to get drunk, and I've never used a drug ever. I don't think ever in my entire usage for any other reason than to get loaded. I wasn't into getting a social buzz or anything of that sort. You know, I went out the very first time and got hammered. We got ourselves enough to make sure that we do the job right. We wanted to see what our dads were into and our brothers were into, and we did it right. And I walked into town, falling down drunk. We went way out. I mean, I don't want to say that I was paranoid or anything, but we walked way out of town with this bottle hidden in our coats, and climbed up into a hay mound of an abandoned barn and an abandoned farm that we knew of, and peeked our head out the window both ways several times and drank this stuff and got very drunk. And walking back into town, I had never experienced anything like this. Falling down and not hurting myself, and just going into town and with complete and total freedom to be anything that I wanted to be, and who gave a shit anyway, you know. My friends, I didn't care what they thought. In my little town there, it was okay for the kids to hang out in this one bar. There was pinball machines and stuff for the kids. We went to that bar and we sat on the bar stools, drunk on our ass, 7th, 8th grade, whatever we were, and just felt like king of the hill. And I guess I would say we talk a lot about the insanity of addiction. I think sometimes about the insanity of non-addiction. What would it be like to go out and have that experience that I had that day and then not pursue that compulsively after that? I don't know. I can't relate to that. But I at every opportunity during those early years, I got as loaded as I could and just loved it. And my dad took care of the booze for the golf course, so we had a little closet down in our basement. And one day I was playing down there somewhere, and up on the top of a shelf, lo and behold, I found a little key. And it was a little master lock key, and I got to thinking, what's this for? And put 2 and 2 together, and before I knew it, I had my own stash. And I was okay. I could count on my parents to go play duplicate bridge every Monday night, and that was never negotiable. They always did. And so Monday night was my night to get loaded. Most people, weekends were their thing. Monday nights were my good nights. It also happened to be the night of my first regular NA meeting. I don't know if that's a coincidence. That must be proof that there is a God, right? Too much of a coincidence. Anyway, I drank, and then the next time that I ever encountered another drug was marijuana, and I had the same experience all over again, only in a completely different way. Oh man, I fell in love. I fell deeply and passionately in love. I got a chance to get high, and I remember distinctly the first time I ever got high. I remember everything about it. I remember where we went. I mean, I tried smoking pot several times and didn't get high, but the day that I got high, I remember what that was like, you know. I was walking down the sidewalk, and my eyes were flitting from line to line on that sidewalk, and it was starting to get kind of psychedelic here, and I was starting to really get into the sensations, the crazy thoughts, the wonderful wandering mind. And I don't know about anyone else, but again, I did not become addicted because these evil drugs snuck up on me and grabbed a hold of me. I became addicted because when I used drugs, I absolutely loved it, and I pursued it. I liked it. The next thing that happened, I guess, those early drug using experiences didn't really have a big negative impact on my life. I can't say that I was destroyed immediately by drugs. I functioned. I did things in high school. I was on the student council in high school, right at the heart of my addiction, and the times leading up into those things, I kind of prided myself on being one of those people who could function in the world and still get high, defying all the odds, right? I was gonna defy whatever they said. You know, you're supposed to use. I had such a fear of getting high because of all these Art Linkletter things that they had. I don't know. I grew up in the Art Linkletter era, you know. And a friend of mine's dad had told us that, you know, this guy's an alcoholic, by the way, an addict, however you want to put that. He used to tell us, he would buy booze for us, but he would tell us, don't be smoking that marijuana, because when you do that, people do things like kissing dogs. I mean, I'm not sure where he got that, but he used to tell us that, literally. He heard about that, and you know, pretty bizarre stuff. He wasn't far off after my addiction pattern was done. But anyway, my first drug experiences, I had no desire to do anything sexual with any animals at all, and I found out that it was reasonably harmless love drug, right? Peace, love, let's get high. And then I entered into, I think, I began to enter into a phase in my life where I loved my new identity. I began to have a change in identity, and I began to become, I don't know if the word is addicted, but I began to become compulsively associated with not only drugs, but all the trappings around them and the people who use them. And I came from northern Minnesota, so those of you who are, city rats or whatever, you probably are thinking of some heavy-duty drug scenes or whatever. I'm talking about in the context of a reasonably small town in a reasonably isolated area, but there was a definite drug culture there. We like to wear our hair long. I used to pride myself in driving down the street, my long hair waving in the breeze, and my rock and roll just cranked as loud as I could. And even if it was cold, I had to have the window down so everybody out there knew that I was a loadie. We used to call ourselves freaks. That was the word. We didn't have these fancy words like loadies and druggies and all that stuff here today. We were freaks. And I wore a red bandana around my head, and I wore low-slung white pants with a tie instead of a snap, and I wore no shoes, and sometimes purple vests and things that made me look extreme, and I loved the whole identity. And in the meantime, I guess I would maybe draw an analogy right here to another aspect of my life, and that is relationships with women. Well, I don't want to say that I'm possessive or or jealous or anything, but there is you've seen this poster up on the walls before with a little dove on it, and it says, "If you love something, set it free." You know that whole one? I heard a variation on that recently that pretty well summed up my personality. If you love something, set it free. If it comes back to you, it's yours. If it doesn't, hunt it down and kill it. The way in which I captured and maintained hostages, relationships, was not particularly healthy, and I can remember a distinct pattern in this. The early stages were gaga, ain't it wonderful, intensity. I think maybe I was addicted to the intensity itself. Ain't it wonderful, ain't she wonderful, and she can't do anything wrong, and if she does, who cares, because it's so beautiful. Our relationship is so wonderful. And that stage would last a while, and pretty soon you get used to each other. And once you get used to her, she just isn't as wonderful as she was, and now it isn't. You aren't riding on this wonderful momentum to work through problems. Now it takes some decision making and some compromise and some of those, all that bullshit. I didn't have a lot of time for all that. And what would happen is these relationships would begin to get sick. But by the time they got real sick, I was so dependent on her to make me feel good and make me acceptable as a man. I grew up and lived my whole adolescence and into adulthood with a girlfriend. And if I didn't have one, I was terrified. I thought I was a piece of shit. I was scared. I was scared of dating and all of that stuff. I didn't want to play all those games. I like it clear cut. You're mine. And so so then it became, in the later stages of these relationships, it became love hate. The old women, can't live with them, can't live without them. That whole story. And it became a process of let's break up and then be so terrified and insecure and unable to function that we get back together, not because we know that it's the thing to do, but because we can't function without each other. And the reason I'm rambling about that particular aspect of my life is because that's exactly the kind of relationship I had with drugs. I got into that stage in the middle where there started to be some problems. I started getting comments from people, teachers, and from parents and from my girlfriend and from these people who were idiots, really, that were lacking in insight and were too self-centered to allow a guy to have a good time without invading him, you know. But I had problems with that particular type of people, and they seemed to be around me all the time, you know. And it's that sort of pattern in my life began to develop, and it did contribute in me to a lot of guilt and a lot of self-loathing, and I just had a very difficult time looking myself in the eye. And I entered into a stage with my addiction and the various drugs that I was using where I was going to quit. I think I used for about 3 years in the kind of the honeymoon type of using where you love it and everything's wonderful. And I spent the remaining about 5 years of my using trying to quit, trying every conceivable thing that I could do. It wasn't like I really wanted to quit, you know. I wanted to control my using. I was obsessed with enjoying this like other people did. I was obsessed with being able to just simply, I mean, I saw people around me. Did you guys have friends who could smoke a joint and hold conversations? You know, I mean, I had friends like that. People who would get high and do whatever and sit down and converse. You know, I'd sit down and I wanted to converse too, but not about the kind of bullshit they wanted. I wanted to talk about, you know, like what was in that movie that, you know, did you know that the molecules in my finger might be the solar system in someone else's galaxy or whatever, you know. That's the kind of stuff that my mind wanted to go on to. And if you wanted to talk about anything that involved being able to maintain a certain continuity in your train of thought, forget it. I'd derail, you know, all the time. And I had problems like that. And so I didn't want to, I had some difficulties getting loaded and then going out with my girlfriend because she began to hate my addiction. And I think today, as I look at my addiction, it was a real Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde thing. I think she loved Dr. Jekyll, but she hated Mr. Hyde. And she wanted to go out for a movie with Dr. Jekyll. You know, is that too much to ask? God damn it, you know. And she'd end up with Mr. Hyde because I couldn't make it through the day without smoking a joint or without getting loaded in one way or another. I got to a point, I guess, with my addiction where the drugs that I was using were not doing the job, really. And I know from my association with NA today where my next step was going to be. I was a senior in college at that time, and I was depressed. My girlfriend, after 5 years, and we had a kid, and we were going to get married, and we had an apartment, and she had the insensitivity to leave me. And I was completely alone in the world. I was crushed. And I was missing classes. I had been doing okay in school up to this point. I was missing classes. I was having parties on school nights, and I was trying to function in this world. And I was getting loaded a lot. I was using drugs that I swore to God I'd never use because addicts use those drugs, and I didn't want to be an addict, and I didn't want to have a problem. And what happened, just to put it simply, is as I hated myself, I was in this Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde personality thing, and it was crushing me. And life was getting real gray. It was like I had a big filter in front of my face, like you would snap a filter on the end of a camera lens. And I was looking out at the world through this filter, and everything I saw was colored with messages like, "What's the use anyway? Oh, there are a bunch of assholes out there, and why bother?" And try to live a life that's motivated and goal-oriented and moving in a positive direction with that kind of stuff rolling through your head and waking up in the morning. I had experiences toward the end where I woke up in a fog, just loaded to the gills the night before, just unable to function. Woke up still thick. My head is out to here, and it's the phone, and it's the cops, you know. And now I gotta. Oh, wait a minute. They said I was living in a dorm room on college campus. Were you doing a little joyriding last night? You know, and I still got to figure out what the hell they're talking about. No, you know, I didn't bother to. I just no, I wasn't. I was home all night last night. You know, and it turns out the night before I had been doing a little creative driving, trying to mow down stop signs and go through hedges and wrong way down the one way, and just kind of entertaining my friends. You know, and by the time I pieced it all together, I had to admit to them. They had me cold, and I had to admit to them, and I had to deal with all that. And that's just one example of a lifestyle kinds of problems that I was having of every kind. And it seemed like what happened to me as I look back now, when an animal gets sick, if you have any pets, when a pet gets sick, their spirit just kind of dies. Their spirit is gone. You look in their eyes, and you look in the eyes of that pet that you love and that you know every quirk of their personality, and they're just kind of gray and not there, nobody home. And that's what happened to me. I believe that is the spiritual aspect of this disease. I lost my spirit. It was gone. I was still functioning. I was going through the numbers. I was going to class, and I was writing my papers and doing my thing. But that wasn't going to last much longer. And a member of my family had already found recovery in the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. She didn't even know about NA. There was NA in my town at that time. She didn't know about that. She asked me if I wanted to go to a meeting with her of AA. And I said, AA? I don't have an alcohol problem. No. My problem's not alcohol. My problem is marijuana. I was a pothead. My problem is that I use these other drugs that I keep telling myself I'm not going to use, and I was beginning to get compulsive with a lot of things that I was never going to do. That's my problem, goddammit. I don't have an alcohol problem. She said, don't worry about all that. Just check it out. So I went to that meeting with her, and I learned something that I was later to apply to the first step of NA. These people were talking about their addiction in the context of their drug of choice, and I related to the feelings right down the... I lost my microphone. There we go. I lost it. I related to the feelings of the disease of addiction right down the line with these people. And something else of great significance to me happened at that meeting. There were some NA members there who came up to me and said, this meeting is good, but if you want to go to the best meeting in town, I don't know if you've ever heard that little expression, the best meeting in town, come with us on Monday night. And I went on Monday night, and it was a very underdeveloped young group of NA that hadn't been around for very long, and most people hadn't been clean for very long. So I didn't get a rousing message of recovery at that meeting, but I related to the teeth, to the bone, to everybody in the room. I felt like I was home. I felt like I feel at this convention. I felt like there are people here that I relate to with everything in me. And I guess I'm just going to go on and talk about my recovery since I've been there. I could give a blow-by-blow of what happened in the events and all that. I think what I'll do instead is just talk about the 12 steps and the way that I've applied them and what they have meant to me. Because I didn't start on step 1 that day, and then after a couple of weeks do step 2, and then after about a few months I had done the 12. It was a process for me of taking a step forward and a step back and trying to figure out through the haze what in the hell this was all about, and trying to define this disease. You got to figure out all the quirks and why addiction is addiction and all that kind of stuff. And I never did figure that out. Those of you who are still trying, and maybe those of you who know what it is now can tell me after the meeting, but I have found that the first step of Narcotics Anonymous has for me been that one single principle in this program that I think is the heart and soul of what binds us together. I think we admitted that we were powerless over our addiction, that our lives had become unmanageable, is the cornerstone of Narcotics Anonymous, in my opinion. When I came here, like I said, I thought my problem was drugs. And I was operating in an environment given to us from the professional community and from other fellowships and that, where we had several labels for our disease. And we talked as though we had several diseases a lot of times. And what the first step of NA has given me is a principle that I can surrender to that basically tells me this: I'm not powerless over drugs. If drugs are not my fundamental problem, I was finally taught in NA after some period of time. I really relate to a guy who said this: if drugs were the problem in this disease, treatment centers would turn out winners. that would be all the treatment we would need, is to go through treatment. They turn out winners instead of chemical dependence. But drugs, for me, haven't been the fundamental problem. Although it's kind of a catch-22, because just before I got to NA, I thought that I wanted to say my problem's not drugs, it's these feelings, it's this way of, it's the world. This world is full of idiots, people don't understand me, and I'm sensitive, and how can I deal with it? These crapheads, out there, and that was my problem. And then I got to NA, and you convinced me for a while that my problem was drugs. And okay, all right, now I belong in NA. But then you turned around and went and convinced me that they weren't drugs at all. The problem wasn't drugs at all, that the problem was a disease called addiction, and my powerlessness is over that disease. And it doesn't matter what drug I pour into that, it's going to release that compulsive pattern again, and I'll have my disease back if I want it back. Another important part of my story, and certainly the single most important part of my story today in recovery, is spirituality, is this whole arena of spirituality. I grew up in a Catholic school. I went to 8 grades of Catholic school, and I don't have anything bad to say about the Catholic Church. I have since been able to use those principles as a way of an expression of my recovery, and I'm not here to tell you that that's a bad place. I grew up there with this little filter I was talking about earlier, and I developed this concept of God, that God was basically this old guy with a gray beard and his kid, and up there where they live, one at the right and one at the left, is a big slate. And when you sin, you get a mark on this slate. And it's kind of for me it was kind of I saw it as kind of a race between Saturdays. If you make it to confession, you get this slate erased. And if you don't make it to confession before you die, you're shit out of luck. You're going the wrong way. But as long as you get there, then when you're there, you have to have the balls to tell the truth, and if you don't have that, that's worse yet. I was screwed up with all that. I thought that spirituality had something to do with a code of morals. I thought that spirituality was a list of do's and don'ts. Do this and you're good, do that and you're bad. And NA has taught me something entirely different than that. NA has taught me that spirituality is a flow of power, an energy flow, something that I can tap into and experience a power that I am otherwise unable to experience. And when you use the word power with addicts, right away we think about service committee meetings, right? All right, let me have that power. I'm not sure that that's the kind of power I'm talking about. If I understood God before to be a kind of a patriarch with a gray beard, I understand God now to be a force more like electricity than like a man. I understand God to be a force that flows, but that there is, in my own personal concept of God, there is a creative intelligence. So it's like take electricity and give it creative intelligence. And our book says the only things that we need to limit our higher power, to make it work within the context of these 12 steps, is that it be loving and caring and greater than ourselves. So, if I came in to this room, the guy who came into this room and set it up before we all came in here came in and he flipped on the lights and he went about his business. He didn't come into this room and then look up at those lights and think, now I wonder what electricity really is. Before I turn on those lights, I need to know what basic physical principles underlie the flow of electrical current. And if I don't understand that, I can't turn on those lights, the guy, I'm sure the guy never thought of that. Talk about keep it simple, right? He came in and flipped the switch and set up the chairs, and it was that simple. And I don't know why that I had to approach spirituality in a way where I thought I had to understand, God first or whatever. I had to have a concept of God that was correct. If I had the gray matter to have a concept of God that was correct, I'd float right the hell out of NA. I wouldn't need NA, I would think my way into right living instead of coming here and into right thinking. But anyway, I don't waste my time today trying to understand that. The second step says that what does it say? We came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. And that little word sanity, when we talk about sanity, most of the time, I have spent a lot of time talking about sanity in terms of insanity. First we have to understand insanity, right? Well, yeah, but most of us have a pretty good relationship with insanity, you know. I don't think that it's real important for us to dwell on that anymore. I need to know what sanity is, kind of, you know. What is that? And I guess what I had to believe, what I had to finally come to believe, because I was living looking through this filter of hopelessness and despair, and I felt like I was a piece of shit. I felt like you would never like me. You know, if you really knew me, you would never like me. And I felt like I was just inadequate and just didn't mesh. Like there were some big gears churning, and all these people were in them, or the whole world's kind of swaying back and forth, and I'm going, you know, bumping shoulders. I just can't pick up the beat, you know, and I don't know exactly what it all was, but my perceptions were distorted. And today, I mean, what I had to do in the second step was come to believe that just like when I did my favorite drug and it hit home and it hit that spot, you know what I mean? It hit that spot, I felt in sync. I had to come to believe that something else would do that would hit that spot so that I could feel in sync with these other people and with this universe and somehow feel like I belonged here, like I was okay for me to be here. That to me is sanity. Looking at the world accurately, with some reasonable accuracy, and developing a constructive relationship with the universe. You know, get grandiose here, right? That to me is sanity, and that's what I had to come to believe in the second step. A power greater than myself, again, keep it real simple. I had to keep it real simple. For me, that power is so intangible and untouchable and not understandable that I have to have my relationship with those things that are tangible, that power flows through. We talk about a multitude of higher powers. You know, I don't know, do you guys believe that there are several higher powers in NA? You know, we talk about that, my higher power, your higher power. Is there several gods that are at the helm of NA? You know, do they get along or whatever? Do they have World Service conferences? You know, I wonder what they have to deal with. You know, but a board of trustees or whatever. I don't know. I have a tendency to believe it this way: there is one power, and our second tradition says, a loving God, as He. Deal with the pronouns we have to deal with. As that loving God may express itself in our group conscience. And I believe that my conception differs from yours. That doesn't mean my God differs from yours. And again, that's why I go with this electricity thing. You know, I have to say, okay, I can get a sponsor who I believe is really working the 12 steps in his or her life, in my case, his life, and really believe that person has a tap into spirituality, and kind of begin to rely on him and his perceptions a little bit. That's one way that I can start to turn my will over to the care of God as I understand God. I can go to regular meetings of Narcotics Anonymous where that power is flowing, where these people are working these 12 steps and they're tapping this energy and they're making an effort in their 12th step to kind of generate this in this room. I can go there and I can start to develop a dependency on that as a conductor of that power, because that power is just too intangible for me. I just can't sit at home in my room and go, God, I'm going to depend on you now. Oh, you know, it just doesn't work that way for me. I gotta have it tangible. I gotta be able to knock on it and listen to it, and smell it. So, and I'm not going to spend this much time on all the steps in case some of you are worried about that. The fourth and fifth step for me is a matter of saying, if I'm going to tap that, and as I look ahead to the 12th step and I say, having had a spiritual awakening as a result of those steps, we try to carry this message to addicts and to practice these principles in all our affairs. What I see in that step is a way of expressing that power. Once I tap it, once I get it flowing, to let it back out. And in order for me to do that, I had to get past this ball of shit right down here behind my belly button. That was fear, and that was anxiety and anger and resentment, and my sexuality was a very painful thing for me when I came to NA, and I think that's reasonably universal. So if anybody's out here today and you're reasonably new and nobody has said that yet, you're probably pretty normal. You know, if your sexuality hurts, and it doesn't matter what way that it hurts. You know, for us it always seems to hurt for a while, and that's why that's such a prominent thing in the fourth step. Now, we don't do that fourth and fifth step because we like pain. We do that fourth and fifth step so we can get that ball of hurt out of there. I don't want that there anymore. That was a horrible way to live. It was coloring my perceptions in a way that made it impossible for me to live comfortably. So I did that fourth and fifth step. I did it many times. I did it inadequately, and I did it haphazardly, and I did it in a more structured way. I did it at the direction of sponsors, and I did it spontaneously, and I did it when I was screwing up bad as a way to try to bail myself out, and whatever. I don't care. I did the fourth step as I conceived of at that time. I needed to do the fourth step, and I believe it's real important to read the literature about that and see what that says. But the fourth and fifth step didn't really clean that out, but it put it in perspective for me. Now I knew what it was that I needed to clean out to open that channel so that energy could flow through there. And that to me it started to clean out in those steps. In the sixth and seventh step, I just have a general belief that the sixth and seventh step is where most of us hang up. Most of the people that I sponsor hang up there. And most of the people that are me, right, yeah. What's that? Roses are red, violets are blue. I'm schizophrenic, and so am I. Yeah. Most of me hang up there too. The sixth and seventh step go this way for me. When I tapped that power source that was drugs, and when I became dependent on that power source, and when I expressed that power source, and when that became a lifestyle pattern for me, I had a personality change. I wanted to embroider the marijuana leaf on the American flag. I thought that we ought to have peace and love, and we ought to do drugs. And I had a personality change. And I surrendered to drugs, and I surrendered to the fact that some of my old values and my old ways of thinking were kind of old and worn out now, and were going down the tubes. When I switched that power source over to this higher power, as I understood this higher power, this electricity, this energy, this love and caring that I feel from you, I was going to have another personality change, and to me that's what the sixth and seventh step is all about. Do I now have the balls to let go of some of that old crap that makes up my identity? You know, to me it's a basic denial of the first step to say that I'm not screwed up. You know, when we come here, we're screwed up in some ways. We just are. That's the first step. So in that sixth and seventh step, I had some real tough things to let go of. I didn't want to let go of some of that stuff. I didn't want to let go of some of those sexuality issues. I didn't want to let go of some of my fears and just live anyway in the face of those fears. You know, I didn't want to let go of some of the trappings of my addictive identity. Some of the ways in which I carried myself, and the things that I said, and the things that I did to keep myself in an addict identity. I didn't want to let go of that, and that to me is part of the sixth and seventh step. And I'm not saying here let's all become, you know, middle class little Ronald Reagan Republicans. You know, that's not the point either. What I'm saying is that I personally had to let go of some of that stuff before I could have peace, before some of that garbage in that ball of pain could get out of me, and so that I could have access to this power that you have in Narcotics Anonymous. And the eighth and ninth step, very simply for me, I had to make amends to rip some more of that garbage out of there, because once I did those 4, 5, 6, and 7, that garbage was in perspective, and I knew what I needed to do with it. And I had to do it in the eighth and ninth. It was that simple. And then the 10th step is kind of like scanning back down that channel and saying, what's my power source here? You know, am I in this sick relationship, and is that my power source now? Am I forgetting about tapping this energy flow in Narcotics Anonymous? Am I into whatever compulsively so that I'm not into spirituality? That's the first question I ask myself in the 10th step, in one way or another. Second is, do I have a ball of garbage building in me? And if so, why? And I know why. I don't have to get into all this, a lot of things. I know why. When I feel that little tracer of guilt in me, I know what it's about. I just have to admit it, is all. The promptly part in the 10th step is a little tough for me, you know. When I'm wrong, I promptly go in the other room and take an inventory of why you're wrong. But so I got quite a bit of growth to do in the area of promptly. but I work on that. And the 11th, so the 10th step just says, if I'm going to spend all this goddamn energy cleaning out this channel here between me and this power source, I better keep it open or I just wasted all my time. And the 11th step for me is, okay, if that channel is open and that power is coming in, then let me develop an active relationship with that power and express it in my life. And we saw through prayer and meditation. Prayer, the 11th step is very clear about prayer, praying only for the knowledge of His will for us and the power to carry that out. When I'm having trouble with prayer, I get real rigid about that 11th step. If I can pray in a lot of different words, but if they all don't mean grant me the knowledge of your will and the power to carry it out, I'm violating my 11th step. I got to get it right back to, in some way, not, I think the height of arrogance is standing here on this little planet, spinning around this little sun in this little solar system in this little galaxy, and here's God at the helm of the universe, orchestrating the whole thing, sending the energy flowing through it, and this little pissant down there on that one little planet is saying, God, would you do my will? Trust my perceptions, God. I don't know. I think that's the height of insanity, and that's the height of arrogance. And so the 11th step has taught me how to get out of that and just say, not get in sync with me, God, but help me to get in sync with you. That might work a little better. You get in sync with me, we might both have big problems. So I'll get in sync with you, thanks. So the 11th step is an extremely important part of my ongoing recovery. I must do it, and I must do it consistently and regularly. If I just do it haphazardly, I forget to do it until I'm in trouble again. I must do it consistently and regularly. Those are the keys. Those are the keys in my meeting attendance, my contact with my sponsor, my 11th step, my 10th step, consistency and regularity. I was taught that. That was drilled through my head until it made sense. If I do anything in this program haphazardly, I risk not doing it at all. But if I do it consistently and regularly, I get it done and I avoid problems that I might otherwise experience. And the 12th step comes in 3 parts for me. Having had a spiritual awakening as the result of those steps. And if that isn't true, then it isn't the 12th step, right? If what I'm doing isn't prefaced by that, then it isn't the 12th step. Doesn't mean I shouldn't do it. I just ought to keep it in perspective. It isn't the 12th step. Having had that spiritual awakening, we try to carry this message to addicts. And that is the icing on the cake in Narcotics Anonymous. That's the fun stuff. I've spent a lot of my recovery putting on the meetings in the institutions and answering the hotline and sponsoring people and being up all night talking to people and responding when addicts reach out for help. And I think that's why I am one of those people in Narcotics Anonymous who is happy. I'm happy. I'm not up here to tell you today, my life is a drag, but God damn it, NA helps me to endure. That is not my message. I've heard that message in NA and I don't like it. I don't buy it. I am happy. And that doesn't mean that life does not deal me situations that I must contend with and that I don't have a personality that wants to complicate things and deal me pain that I wouldn't otherwise need. I have all those things. And that's why I need NA. And the 12 steps says practice these principles in all our affairs. The day that I get that right, call me back and I'll do this on Saturday night instead of Saturday afternoon, and we'll all know how to do it in all our affairs. But I can't say that I practice these principles in all of my affairs, but I can say this: that expression is a guiding principle in my life that I strive for, like so many other things in NA. Humility. What the hell is humility? It's a guiding principle in my life that I strive for. Christ, I don't know what it is, but I strive for it. What is honesty? Those things are principles that I strive for. And I guess I would just like to say some things in closing about Narcotics Anonymous. If I started a love affair with drugs in my active addiction, and that love affair got very sick, I had to substitute that somehow. I had to have the same thing that my drugs gave me without destroying me like my drugs did. And that's what Narcotics Anonymous has given me. I have a love affair with Narcotics Anonymous. I love NA. And there are some other things in my life that have been influential in my recovery. One of them was AA, and some of the people that I know there. I have made a decision in my own life and my own recovery, not out of any resentment or any competition or any negative feelings at all, with a sense of extreme gratitude toward AA. I've made a decision to go to only Narcotics Anonymous meetings for my recovery. And I bring that up for really only one reason. If in Narcotics Anonymous, I personally hold the opinion that Narcotics Anonymous as a whole, collectively, as an organization, needs to continue to grow. We need to continue to develop. We have a ways to go with some things. And if all of us who can stand up here and look you right in the eye and say, I am happy today, I'm living a spiritual life today, and I'm comfortable. If all of us leave NA or don't come to NA for that, how is NA ever going to continue to learn to generate that for the rest of us? And so I do that, and I do that with a sense of love and loyalty, and I'm not trying to come off like a martyr. I get that from Narcotics Anonymous in large measure. This program deals out to me everything that I need, and I think that right now I've overstayed my time, and I really would like to express my gratitude for all of you for sticking around and listening, and I love you all with all my heart. Thanks.